This is CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. Russian-backed forces in Ukraine claim they've captured a strategic town in the Donetsk region. Troops say Liman is under Russian control.
Our other headlines, as Uvalde mourns the victims of the school shooting, the National Rifle Association stages its annual convention in the same US state.
UK energy customers welcome government cash to reduce household bills, but not everyone in Boris Johnson's own party is happy to splash the cash.
And art and the city, how London offices are getting a makeover to lift workers out of the lockdown gloom.
Russian-backed forces in Ukraine claim they've captured a strategic town in the Donetsk region.
Troops say Liman is now under Russian control. It's close to the Ukrainian-held cities of Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. The governor of Luhansk says the situation is getting worse by the hour for Ukrainian soldiers. Meanwhile, 9 people are reported killed in Kharkiv and a further 10 in the city of Dnipro as Russian shelling continues. The Associated Press correspondent Philip Crowther is in Lviv. Philip, what's the latest you have on the Russian advances in the Donbass?
Well, Russia has been throwing an enormous amount of manpower and military hardware at the Donbass region and at the front line with Ukrainian soldiers, and we are seeing the effects of that. Ukraine is saying very clearly that they are outmanned and outgunned, but that they are trying to defend their positions as well as they possibly can. But all of this is leading to incremental advances that one can see on the ground from Russian forces. And the latest example, as you mentioned, is the city of Liman. That's in the Donetsk region. We're looking at these 2 regions that are part of the Donbass in the east of the country. Donetsk, first of all, but then also Luhansk. Donetsk is the part of that region where Russia doesn't yet control a larger percentage of the terrain. That's not the case in Luhansk, where, according to the governor, 95% of that area is in control of Russian forces right now. It was actually Russian-backed rebels who had already had an enormous amount of control in the Donbass region since 2014 who took over that city of Liman with the support of Russian troops. And it brings those troops very close, first of all, to the city of Sloviansk, but also then to the city of Kramatorsk. You might remember that that is where a Russian missile struck people who were waiting to get one of the evacuation trains. That is why that city will be going into the history books for all the wrong reasons. But those advances are happening in the Luhansk and in the Donetsk regions, and that is why the Ukrainian government and the military are making these demands very clearly again. They need those heavy weapons from the United States, multiple long-range missile launchers from the United States that haven't been agreed upon yet within the Biden administration. They want those as quickly as possible and believe that they can win these battles in the Donbass region with those weapons that have not appeared on the front lines so far.
Philip, away from the military campaign, what about the diplomatic path? What's the Ukrainian view on peace talks now?
Well, look, it's interesting what the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said earlier today, and that, frankly, has not been picked up by Ukrainian media, saying essentially this, that there will just have to be talks with Russia at some point for this war to come to an end. But essentially the Ukrainian government's point of view, and this is also the Ukrainian people's point of view, is that there cannot be peace talks right now as this fierce fighting is happening, because Russia is asking essentially for Ukraine to accept the situation as it is. That means large Russian control of the southern portions of Ukraine, also already significant control of the Donbass region in the east, Ukraine wants all of those Russian troops to be out of Ukrainian territory as quickly as possible. That would be the basis for peace talks. Difficult to see those right now, of course. Ukraine right now would not accept a ceasefire, would not accept to cede any territory either, and that is precisely what a very large majority of the Ukrainian people would believe right now as well. When it comes to diplomatic talks, by the way, there were quite a few, and there were even face-to-face meetings between the foreign ministers Kuleba of Ukraine and Lavrov of Russia. That was in March in Turkey the last time, and Turkey still believes it can be the go-between between these two warring countries right now. It has diplomatic relations with both, though it has criticized Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and it believes it can be the country possibly to bring the two presidents together. Zelensky of Ukraine wants this. Putin of Russia so far has refused to have any kind of meeting like that with the Ukrainian president as long as there is no agreement beforehand.
Philip, thanks for that. Philip Crowther of the Associated Press in Lviv.
Well, as Philip was explaining there, Ukraine's President Zelensky says an end to the invasion will only be reached through direct negotiations with Vladimir Putin. Speaking to an audience in Indonesia, Zelensky said he was not eager to talk to the Russian president, but that it would be necessary, in his words, to reclaim the life of a sovereign country. Well, our correspondent Stuart Smith is in Moscow, and a reminder that journalists in Russia are working under media laws that restrict what they can report. So, Stuart, President Putin also speaking. Has he said any more about Ukraine?
Yes, speaking at the Supreme Eurasian Economic Council, a body that the Kremlin described as one of the most important economic bodies in the Eurasian space, bringing together the leaders of Russia, headed by President Vladimir Putin, as well as Belarus, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, all five of these in the Eurasian Economic Union. And the priority for the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, he said, was to increase mutual trade between these five countries, especially important now in the face of Western sanctions. He said mutual trade is growing and that the ultimate goal would be to create some kind of single marketplace within the Eurasian space. He also spoke about other priorities such as the free movement of goods, services and labour, particularly labour, which is very important for the Russian economy because migrants play a major role in creating and fulfilling low-wage jobs here in Russia, migrants from these other locations. And although there is domestic opposition to some migration, it is integral to the way the Russian economy works. But President Putin had a particular topic he wanted to discuss in light of Western sanctions, and that was increasing the use of national currencies, i.e. not using euros and dollars for trade between these countries, but their own currencies, like for Russia, the ruble. And he says currently that's at 75%, but he would like to see it used even more frequently between all these countries. And one thing he signed earlier in the day was a presidential decree around the area of copyright. So copyright holders now in Russia, people that owe copyright holders will only need to pay in rubles to Russian bank accounts set up on the copyright holders' behalf in order to pay their obligations. This affects things like films and music, and it's been criticized already by the music industry here in Russia. A representative of the Sony Warner music group has said that this could jeopardize payments to Russian artists signed to foreign labels, creating completely unfair advantages for the debtor who could complicate matters and ultimately abuse the system without much penalty. They say they want the existing situation to remain. It's something that's already been put in place for gas, forcing rubles to be used, and also for planes, the leasing of aircraft to Russian airlines. And there's talk that it could be expanded to food exports too, all to try and make the ruble more important in international trade.
Also, Stuart, there have been more curbs placed on foreign diplomats in Russia.
That's right, yeah. 5 Croatian diplomats expelled from Russia today. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs says the main reason is in response to a similar expulsion of Russian diplomats by the Croatians. They say, though, it's also due to so-called groundless attempts to blame Russia for war crimes in Ukraine and for its military support in Ukraine. It comes just after 34 French diplomats, 27 Spanish and 24 Italian diplomats were also asked to leave Russia.
Stuart, many thanks. That's our correspondent Stuart Smith in Moscow.
Stefano Stanino is Secretary General of the European External Action Service, the wing of the EU which covers foreign relations, security and defence.
He's been telling CGTN's Stephen Cole that the pandemic and the war in Ukraine have triggered some significant policy changes.
Has become much more uncertain, so there's much more a need for security and to provide security to European citizens. The European Union has agreed to take part of this responsibility and to make a huge effort. If you see what has happened in the last few months, this has been a paradigmatic shift from all points of view. It's not only Sweden and Finland joining the European Union, is Denmark opting in again in the defense sector, is a fundamental increase in the budget of the defense of the European Union member states. So, I mean, there is a very clear sense that the world has become much more insecure, and the European Union in this world wants to make it sure that, again, the continent and its citizens can feel that we are more protective and that we are trying to support the capacity of our society to become more resilient to threats and challenges coming from outside.
And you can see more of that interview on the agenda this weekend here on CGTN.
In the United States, the National Rifle Association is going ahead with its annual convention, just 3 days after 21 people were killed in one of the country's deadliest school shootings. The convention is in Houston in Texas, the same state where the Uvalde shooting took place. Former President Donald Trump is one of the speakers. Let's talk to Associated Press correspondent Mark Stewart, who's in Uvalde. So, Mark, there has been a growing criticism now about the police who have changed their story on their response time to this shooting.
Hi there, Robin. It's good to see you again. Yes, there has been so much concern about the police response. There is so much public outrage that law enforcement is actually planning another news conference. It actually may have just started to address some of these lingering concerns about how this response was handled, including the fact that it took about an hour for a tactical team from the Border Patrol to get inside the school. In addition, we learned the shooter, the 18-year-old, who was eventually wounded by law enforcement, actually walked into the school without any kind of blockade. The door actually was open. That is causing a lot of concern, also a lot of outrage. And because of the public outcry, law enforcement, again, is going to be having another briefing, so we may get even more specifics about exactly what transpired. And then still there is this lingering question about motivation. What prompted this 18-year-old to come to the school and commit such a horrendous act of violence, Robin?
And Mark, this National Rifle Association meeting is going ahead in the same state as the shooting. What's been the reaction to that?
So the National Rifle Association is holding its annual convention in Houston, and it is something that had been scheduled for about 2.5 years, yet despite the backdrop here, it is still taking place. A number of protests are planned, and so expect to see protesters lined outside the convention center there. Still, it is not exactly going as planned. 2 lawmakers from Texas have decided not to speak. According to their staff, it's because of scheduling issues. Some high-profile entertainers were supposed to perform. Several have also backed out. Yet at the same time, President Biden will be heading here to Texas over the weekend on Sunday with the First Lady to meet with many of the families here and offer their condolences.
And what are the National Rifle Association likely to say on gun control measures, given what's happened this week?
So, Robin, the NRA has been very upfront about its position on all of this, saying that the shooting here will be a point of reflection, but also it will deflect any criticism of policy. If anything, expect to hear the NRA basically double down on what it views as the importance of having a safe and secure school, with provisions in place at the school to prevent something like this. We are expecting to hear from former President Trump, as well as Texas Senator Ted Cruz. And it will be interesting to watch, certainly, if the messaging changes or adjusts or takes even more reaction to what we have witnessed here earlier in the week.
Mark, thanks very much. Mark Stewart from the Associated Press there in Uvalde in Texas.
Well, this Texas shooting has intensified the debate for tougher gun controls in the United States. In 2019, New York State passed a law to ensure that those deemed a threat to themselves or others cannot buy a firearm.
But a deadly shooting in Buffalo earlier this month raised questions over whether the law is being properly implemented. Our correspondent William Denslow reports.
With the community in mourning, an inquest is underway. How an 18-year-old who threatened a murder-suicide last year was able to evade a red flag law, buy a semi-automatic weapon and use it to kill 10 people at a supermarket in Buffalo, New York. Governor Kathy Hochul now vows to strengthen that extreme risk protection order law.
I'll be signing an executive order requiring the state police to file an extreme risk order of protection under New York's red flag law when they believe that an individual is a threat to himself, herself, or others. Previously, current law, it's an option to do so.
The state passed a red flag law in 2019. It allows teachers, law enforcement, or relatives to ask the courts to temporarily block an individual from getting their hands on a firearm. Since the red flag law was passed, judges in New York have blocked nearly 600 people from possessing a gun. 18 other US states have similar legislation, but many believe it's a violation of the Second Amendment. Critics of red flag laws say they're ineffective and infringe on the right to carry arms.
It's gun confiscation without any reason to have that yet, because the person usually did not commit a crime yet. It is, people just reporting the person and saying that they are a danger to themselves or others.
Supporters of red flag laws believe they can be effective with proper funding and training. But some analysts are sceptical.
Handing somebody a firearm is a pretty big gamble. And while it's a constitutional right, there still has to be some sort of balance. And I'm not sure how we get there, but I think that what we have seen is that extreme protective orders are certainly not going to be the be-all, end-all that we'd hoped for.
It's why Governor Hochul has vowed to take broader steps to strengthen gun control measures in the state. William Denslow, CGTN, New York.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, more trouble for Twitter. Elon Musk is sued by an investor over the handling of his billionaire's bid for the company.
So this is it. I'm just about to be shot.
Tents here, bottles are being thrown as they do so.
There are about 3 critical bridges here in Malawi. That's one of them. We're going to cross that bridge.
As you can see behind me, police forces
who are replying with gas. Gas just came
tear gas. So it's all begun now.
Divisions leading the charge into West Mosul have brought us here.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots.
This is where most of the fighting has been concentrated.
It's the front line now after 9 days of fighting.
We're about 2 to 3 kilometers from the front
clear
line.
view of this front line position.
Have you ever wondered how much a human life is worth?
Have you ever looked up at the night sky and considered whether aliens are staring back? Or if it's even possible to measure intelligence?
If that sounds like you, it's time to join the Answers Project with me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge.
We've recruited the best brains in the world, award-winning astrophysicists, giants of medical science, and former presidential advisors to help us tackle humanity's biggest questions.
Find the answers wherever you get your podcasts.
Back to Global Business Europe. A quick reminder that CGTN is available to watch for free on all the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube, Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Freeview.
Britain's finance minister says he's confident in the long-term health of the economy, despite rising inflation and an energy cost crisis.
Rishi Sunak's decision to tax energy firms to help households has been broadly welcomed, but critics say it was politically timed, coming after a report into lockdown parties in government.
Our correspondent Guy Henderson has been getting reaction to the government's help for energy customers.
Anti-poverty campaigners had suggested the UK Chancellor would have to spend about $12 billion to have a meaningful impact on the cost of living crisis. He's ended up confounding his critics by offering a package of support worth about $18.9 billion. The Resolution Foundation, a think tank, says that the level of support now on offer to those on the bottom half of the UK income ladder has now been doubled, offsetting about 82% of the total rise in energy bills. Even the main opposition Labour Party like the sound of these measures. The focus of their criticism is, well, we came up with most of these ideas several months ago. Is this then problem solved? Well, that is a question I've been putting to people on the streets of London.
I'm not sure who's going to get the money, but I don't know what's going to happen in future, because it's just we don't know really what's going to happen in like few more months time. Like it's so scary.
I think it's more like worrying for older people who don't want to turn their radiators on, and I mean it's good that it's summer now.
I fear that yes, this is fine, it's a bit of quick help, but it's a minor bit of help. The truth is we're facing a recession and galloping inflation, and so a few £100 here or there is not a massive help to anybody.
Two principal concerns from here. One, would pumping more money into the economy at this time potentially make the problem worse by driving inflation up further? That is something that Sunak was pressed on Friday, and he expressed the view that he felt the impact would be minimal. Number two, if inflation was to continue to remain high, would the Chancellor be able to continue to provide support, for example, through into 2023? And if he did try to do that, would he still be able to follow through on his promised tax cuts ahead of a UK general election due to take place here in the UK by 2024? If those plans were shelved or somehow compromised, that may make some within his own party extremely unhappy. In fact, one Conservative MP has already described these measures as like throwing red meat to socialists.
So, Guy, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has lost another supporter, and he's also changing the ministerial code. Yeah,
I mean, patience is already running pretty thin with this Conservative leadership within the Conservative Party after report had been released in full on Wednesday into illegal parties held during lockdown in Downing Street. You've now got a Conservative MP who has announced on Friday that he is resigning from a senior post inside the Home Office in protest at what's now called and known as Partygate. The government has also announced that it's going to be making changes to the Ministerial Code of Conduct for senior ministers in government. Now, that's not directly related to Partygate, of course, but I think it does show the extent to which the government is keen to show publicly that it is willing to take action to sort of show it's cleaning up its act at the moment. Critics had said, which I think you mentioned, that the timing of this package of support to deal with the cost of living, which was announced on Thursday, was politically timed to try and move things on from Partygate. And yet it seems as though there's still an awful lot of internal pressure building, perhaps even as a result of this package of measures. We saw Boris Johnson sitting behind the Chancellor on Thursday as he was making that announcement in Parliament, murmuring the words genius. He was very much behind it. And yet, further up the benches on the same side, a lot of his backbenchers in the Conservative Party sat in stony silence. A lot of those measures that were announced go very much against their core instincts.
Well, there's no such thing as a free handout, is there? I mean, I wonder if the Finance Minister can keep spending like this. The Conservative Party used to be known as the party of low taxation, a small state and low spending. It's blown that, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and even now, when he's pressed on it, the Chancellor won't rule out the possibility of continuing to spend, as long as inflation remains as high as it is at the moment. One thing that's interesting to note, if you've heard the Chancellor speak recently in public, he's often cited, to bolster some of his arguments, a think tank called the Institute for Fiscal Studies. And on Friday, it's the head of that same institute that has come out and said that he suspects that in 12 months' time, inflation is still going to be high, and that in 12 months' time, there's likely to be pressure on the Chancellor to have to put more money into trying to solve this problem. So I think the question a lot of Conservatives will be asking now is, has he opened a tap, turned on a tap that he's going to struggle to close? How far might they be prepared to go inside the Conservative Party to prevent that happening? Sunak's come out and said, I'm still in theory a low-tax Conservative. I just didn't want to leave hard-up families out in the cold. But I think what he definitely has done is further ignited an already very heated debate about what the Conservative Party should stand for and where it should go from here.
Guy, thank you very much. Good to see you. Our correspondent, Guy Henderson. Well, Hungary's Prime Minister says further sanctions against Russia, including an oil embargo, should not be discussed at next week's EU summit. The EU is offering Viktor Orban exemptions to try to resolve the standoff.
Hungary is heavily dependent on Russian energy and says an oil ban would have a devastating impact on its economy. Peter Megyesi is the former Prime Minister of Hungary. He spoke to our correspondent Jessica King about the often difficult relationship between Budapest and Brussels.
First of all, I would like to ask to make the distinction between Hungary and Hungarian government, because the Hungarian people is very much pro-European. The polls shows that 75, even 80% of the population is agreed to be member of the European Union. Orban, he wants to fighting with Europe. Sometimes he has the right. For example, in the energy policy. You know, the most depending country of the Russian gas and oil, this is Hungary and Slovakia. And we come to change in 5 months our structure in the energy policy. So that's he have to fighting in this field.
And with the war in Ukraine, President Zelensky has in the past been critical of Prime Minister Orban, saying that Hungary is not doing enough to help Ukraine in this conflict with Russia. What do you make of the relationship, the situation at the moment between the two leaders and Hungary's stance on the war?
The Prime Minister tried to have a distance from this war. The government is not really very friendly to Ukraine, but the people, the Hungarian people, is very friendly. A lot of Ukraine family coming to Hungary and are welcome in house of Hungarians. And we give the support, and we give the food, and we make a lot of measures to help the Ukraine families. The position of Orban, that's he have to defend the Hungarian interest.
G7 countries have agreed to phase out coal-powered energy, but failed to set a deadline. Their climate ministers meeting in Berlin said the energy crunch caused by the Ukraine war should not derail efforts to fight climate change and end the use of fossil fuels. They said electric power should predominantly decarbonise by 2035, with what they call concrete and timely steps towards phasing out coal.
Industrial firms in China have seen their profits fall faster than at any time in the last 2 years due to soaring prices and coronavirus. Average profit shrank 8.5% from a year earlier, well down from a 12.2% gain in March. This is the biggest fall since the height of the pandemic in 2020. One official from the National Bureau of Statistics said the resurgence of COVID caused big shocks for businesses.
The cost of rapid charging for electric cars in the UK has risen by more than a fifth since last year. Higher energy costs are behind the price increase. Rapid chargers can fully power a vehicle in around 40 minutes, compared to 8 hours for a home charger. But both rapid charging and home charging are still less expensive than petrol or diesel per kilometre.
EasyJet says an IT glitch that caused around 200 flights to be cancelled has now been fixed, but flights are still disrupted. The company gave no details of the fault. Earlier this year, British Airways was hit by computer issues, which caused short-haul flights to be cancelled.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. After all that Afghanistan has endured, now a food crisis being made worse by the war in Ukraine.
It is now important that all of us in Europe act very swiftly.
Fines for the non-vaccinated will most likely be between $1,000 and $4,000.
The new Omicron variant circulating in southern Africa.
The financial markets have also reacted badly to the news.
Growing dissatisfaction with the way the Dutch government is handling the pandemic.
Cancelling the city's main public Christmas markets for the second year in a row.
Protests and riots by those opposed to restrictions and vaccinations.
There is no room for complacency in this ongoing battle against COVID.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and the bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Robin Dwyer. Our top stories: Russian-backed forces in Ukraine claim they've captured a strategic town in the Dometic region. Troops say Liman is now under Russian control.
As Uvalde mourns the victims of the school shooting, the National Rifle Association stages its annual convention in the same US state.
And UK energy customers welcome government cash to reduce household bills, but not everyone in Boris Johnson's own party is happy to splash the cash.
Elon Musk is being sued by a Twitter investor who says the billionaire has manipulated the stock price during his takeover bid for the company.
The proposed class action lawsuit claims Musk saved himself $156 million by delaying the disclosure of his stake in the social media platform. Well, let's talk to our correspondent John Terrett in New York. John, Elon Musk in the headlines again, the target of shareholders.
Oh, yes, Robin and Jamie. There are so many stories this week, and indeed in the last 24 hours, about Elon Musk and Twitter. I hardly know where to begin, but I've corralled them into the key ones for you to help you understand. I mean, chief among them is that he is being sued by at least one Twitter shareholder, and probably a lot more as well. And they're very angry that he has been manipulating the share price. At least that's the allegation going forward. Now, the thing to remember is that he has signed an NDA, which is a non-disclosure agreement, which means that because he's buying the company, he knows an awful lot about it now, which he's not at liberty to say. But he has, of course, been using Twitter, ironically, in order to, we think, bring the price that he agreed down quite significantly. And as you know, that's $44 billion, and he's paying $54.20 per share. But we think everybody around him is saying, look, Elon, you're paying too much, because really Twitter is only worth somewhere between $33 and $35 billion, about $10 billion less than you are paying. So he's been saying all these things on Twitter, which really have driven down the share price on and off, and the shareholders are not too happy about that, and they're not too happy about the timing of pretty much everything that he's done regarding taking over Twitter, as you said. But among the highlights of what he said in the last 2 weeks, 2 weeks ago on Friday, he said the deal was on hold. And that's always the great fear with this man, you know, that he doesn't really mean it, that he's not sincere, that he will actually pull out. He said it was on hold. Twitter said it's not. It does appear to be going forward. And there was that row about a week ago as well about how many robots were on the Twitter site, which Elon Musk was really pushing very hard via Twitter. That seems to have died down a little bit now. Anyway, they had the AGM on Wednesday. I think there were some fireworks. My understanding is that all the shareholders have yet to vote on whether the deal does actually go ahead, though the board of management have certainly agreed it, as we know. The other headline regarding Elon Musk, he agreed in the last couple of days to up the ante on his personal account regarding this takeover. He's now prepared to stand by $33.5 billion. That's his personal stake, which is an awful lot of money. Over and above that, Twitter was sued within the last 24 hours, basically for going back on an agreement where they promised not to share members' data, and they did so they were fined multi-millions of dollars for that. And the other story just today, Jack Dorsey, who set up Twitter and was the CEO and was highly criticized by Wall Street for running Twitter and Square, his other company. Dorsey is now exiting Twitter to make way for Elon Musk, but Musk is now tweeting saying that he might keep Jack Dorsey around because of the experience that he has regarding Twitter. And certainly if he isn't at the management level, then Musk is saying he wants him to hang on at the sort of board level to advise. So, you know, as always with this man, this great entrepreneur of our era, there are lots of different strands to pull together. But I think the key one is that despite everybody's fears, the takeover does indeed appear to be making progress.
John, lucky you, a 3-day weekend coming up.
Yeah, I know. Let me tell you a little secret, by the way. Whenever there's a 3-day weekend here, now nobody else will report this, so I will. On the Friday before the 3-day weekend, at 3:33 and 33 seconds, which is 19:33 and 33 seconds GMT today, everybody on the floor here starts whooping and hollering. They go whoop, 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 like that. I don't know why they do it. It's one of those funny traditions, but it will happen today ahead of the 3-day weekend. Monday is Memorial Day. This place is going to be closed. And if the Dow Jones is down for the week at the end of this trading session on Friday, that'll make 9 weeks in a row. And you'll have to go back to the 1920s, the last time that happened. But it's not going to happen because there's a very strong rally going on. It will finish in the green for the week. And the reason is the Federal Reserve minutes on Wednesday suggesting a clear path for raising interest rates, which these markets like and want. Secondly, very strong retail earnings this week. And thirdly, it does appear as if inflation may have peaked. Now, the Federal Reserve's preferred measure of inflation, which we don't often report, nobody does, it's a private thing for them. It does indeed seem to suggest that inflation may actually have peaked. For so all of those reasons, the markets are going to end today strongly in the green. The dollar, of course, is down. They're talking about parity with the euro by the end of the year. And that's happening because investors think that now, if things continue to go well, if inflation has indeed peaked, then the Federal Reserve can calm down its interest rate rising program in the second half of the year. That makes the dollar less attractive. But I will finish by saying this, folks. Remember, we had a hugely bad day just a week ago, and very little has really changed since then. So bear that in mind.
John, enjoy the long weekend. Good to see you. Our correspondent, John Terrace in New York.
Thanks.
China has criticised comments made by US Secretary of State Antony Blinken after he called Beijing the most serious long-term threat to world order. China's foreign ministry accused the United States of diverting attention from its own domestic problems and trying to maintain global dominance.
The address made by Secretary of State Blinken is essentially spreading false information, playing up the so-called China threat, interfering with China's internal politics and slinging mud at China's policies. The intention is to contain China's development and maintain US hegemony. China is strongly dissatisfied with this.
China's foreign ministry says Beijing is keen to boost collaboration with South Pacific countries. Wang Yi is in Kiribati, part of an 8-country tour of the region. The Kiribati president called his visit a milestone for relations. The two countries will work together on China's Belt and Road Initiative, pandemic measures and climate change.
Athens is celebrating 50 years of diplomatic relations between Greece and China. Greece is already a key shipping hub for European trade with Asia, and officials are keen to open new sectors to Chinese investment, such as energy, agriculture and technology. Our correspondent Evangelos Ipsas reports.
In the heart of the city of Piraeus, at this historic building, two ancient civilizations celebrate 50 years of bilateral relations. It's a sign of the rapidly growing bonds between Greece and China, cultural, trade and economic.
To pursue the mutual beneficial and win-win cooperation between us, particularly to align the Belt and Road Initiative with the Greece 2.0 recovery plan, so as to enhance our cooperation in the fields of infrastructure, energy, agriculture, shipping building, and digital economy and green transformation.
Officials from both countries attended the ceremony not far away, the port of Piraeus, a flagship project of China's Belt and Road Initiative, the first and largest BRI project in Europe. Greece was the first EU country to sign up to the Belt and Road Initiative to advance cooperation between the two nations. Now that cooperation has brought in hundreds of millions of dollars of investment from China, creating tens of thousands of jobs. But away from the infrastructure, Greece and China continue to deepen cultural and tourism links.
We are looking forward a brighter future in the coming 50 years. I think the basic pillars for future is the enhancing of the peoples-to-peoples exchanges and friendship between our two countries, which could provide the lasting momentum for our, development cooperation.
After years of dealing with a debt crisis and an international bailout, the Greek economy is now picking up with a recovery plan called Greece 2.0. And investments from Beijing continue to be an important source of income in boosting that exact plan. But besides the traditional investments in the country, Greek officials are now opening up new sectors.
As far as opportunities for Chinese investments are concerned, shipping, infrastructure, transport services, supply chain, and cargo handling continue to top the list. But there is ample opportunity for investments in the energy sector, renewable and alternative sources, agriculture, and technology.
From the handover of the Olympic flame last October to the anniversary of 50 years of diplomatic relations and the investment in Belt and Road projects, the two countries are clearly aiming to strengthen their global connections. Evangelos Ipsas for CGTN, Athens.
Europe.cgtn.com has all the week's top stories from China. Here's a quick take of some of them.
As COVID cases drop, Hong Kong will resume celebrations to mark 25 years since the UK returned the city to China. Oats, grasses and other plants grown on the Shenzhou 13 space mission are being assessed by scientists. One of the world's most powerful quantum computers has been processing billions of data points to better predict the weather ahead of a crucial flooding season. The Chinese Super League will begin next week under the slogan "Together for a New Future." Billions of tiny fish fry have been released during the summer fishing ban to help replenish stocks in the Bohai Sea. And the last turbine has been installed in China's giant Behertan hydroelectric plant, the world's second biggest.
All that and more at cgtn.com.
The new French Prime Minister says the cost of living crisis is her priority. Elizabeth Bourne made her comments as she met ministers to chart a roadmap for the new government. President Emmanuel Macron picked the former Labour minister as his new Prime Minister in preparation for legislative elections next month. This is only the second time in 30 years that a woman has held the job.
The World Health Organization says monkeypox can be contained if action is taken now. Officials say the priority needs to be containing the disease in non-endemic countries. Monkeypox, typically a mild viral infection, is common in African countries, but its spread to Europe and the United States has raised concerns.
Switzerland will destroy more than 620,000 expired doses of Moderna's coronavirus vaccine as demand drops significantly. 34 million doses were secured for 2022 for a population of around 8.7 million people. In February, Switzerland promised to donate 15 million surplus doses to poorer countries.
You're watching CGTN. Coming up next, we'll be getting our teeth into more top stories, including the world's largest gathering of vampires on the anniversary of Dracula.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more...
Just gotta be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us, excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
The world has changed under the pressure of the pandemic. For many of us, life is returning to some kind of normal. As we're adapting to changes in all of our lives, let Global Business Europe be your guide to the new normal. Join us weekdays on CGTN.
This week on Razor, the new UN treaty which aims to radically reduce plastic pollution at its source. And we meet the biologists working to conserve plant life on our warming planet before it's too late.
Extinction is a natural process. Species evolve and go extinct, but we think the rate at which that's happening is much faster than it was in the past. So it's a concern for us.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Afghanistan has endured decades of war and instability. Now the war in Ukraine has put pressure on Afghanistan's economy.
It has exacerbated the food crisis in the country, and prices of raw materials are soaring. Our correspondent Zamaralai Abbasin reports now from Kabul.
The conflict in Ukraine continues to increase pressure on Afghanistan's wheat supply, food commodities, agriculture inputs and fuel prices. According to a recent report by the UN, access to seeds, fertilizer and water for irrigation is limited. Labor opportunities are scarce and people have incurred enormous debts to buy food over the past few months.
This is the biggest market of flour, oil and other raw materials in Kabul, where merchants and customers complain about the skyrocketing prices as this bus.
After the war waged in Ukraine, the European countries turned to Kazakhstan markets. As a result, the prices of wheat flour and edible oil soared.
We see an increase of 700 to 800 Afghanis in every sack of flour. The reason is the Ukraine-Russia conflict, and we are also affected.
The prices are skyrocketing, people have limited income sources and they have to decrease their purchases.
While some Taliban authorities acknowledge that the Ukraine-Russia crisis has had a negative global impact, they say it hasn't affected Afghanistan much. Still, some officials in the Afghan government worry about rising hunger.
Afghanistan is facing famine. But the world wants to show itself as a philanthropist and a humanitarian by distributing a sack of flour and 5 kilos of edible oil. It has no positive impact on the people.
Afghanistan has had an impartial foreign policy. Therefore, we haven't been affected much due to this international crisis, which is a confrontation of the East and West and a proxy war of the US and Russia.
But Afghan experts say 9 months after the Taliban takeover, the Ukraine-Russia crisis has exacerbated Afghanistan's food crisis.
Economically, it affected Afghanistan so much that Afghanistan import wheat from the Kazakhstan's, oil, fuel, these things. It affected the whole region, especially Afghanistan.
And the situation is grim. The United Nations, the International Rescue Committee, and Save the Children and separate reports last week confirmed that nearly 20 million people in Afghanistan, more than half the population, are facing acute hunger. Almost 10 million of those people are children. Ismail Abbasin, CGTN, Kabul.
In India, sales of high-end goods are soaring. From cars to watches to clothes, some brands have had their best ever year of sales.
But while the booming luxury sector is lifting the economy, it's being tempered by a lack of demand in rural areas. Our correspondent Radhika Bajaj reports now from Mumbai.
It's already been an amazing ride this year for German carmaker Mercedes-Benz in India. 5,000 Mercedes cars have been sold since January this year. And the company expects its record sales of 15,000 plus cars in 2018 to be easily surpassed in 2022.
In the last 2 years post-COVID, there is so much of liquidity in the system, plus each and every corporate, the top 500 odd corporates who generally buy cars from us, we see all of them are reasonable profits, a lot of ESOPs out there. And overall, even when we look at the business side of, 80% of our customers are also from business community, even they do well.
Mercedes-Benz India says their customers are getting younger and their most premium models are selling twice in numbers when compared to pre-COVID sales.
It's not just luxury cars. Well-earning Indians are also upgrading where they live. Since the pandemic began, luxury real estate deals have shot up, with properties being sold from $6 million to a whopping $130 million.
It's also been a good time for luxury watch retailers, and high-end clothing is also flying off the shelves. Fueled by pent-up demand and the feeling of rewarding oneself, experts say discretionary spending on luxury items is likely to continue.
For the rich ones, the avenues for experiences are still less, to go out for those vacations outside India or having big fat weddings. All those experiences were one thing they were not able to spend on. So then what did they do? They parked their money in the goods which provided them experience. Could be automobiles, could be jewelry, so watches. So therefore all those sectors, even real estate, because everybody wanted to have better, good homes.
At the other end of the spectrum, demand from rural India has further slackened after April retail inflation touched an 8-year high and wholesale inflation rose to a 17-year high. This lack of rural demand could hurt the economy much more than sales of luxury goods can help it.
The K-shaped recovery is what is at the back of this kind of emerging demand pattern. For some time, the demand for such items will certainly provide support to the consumption demand. But for a broad-based demand and a broad-based recovery, unless and until the items of mass consumption, remains buoyant, it will be very, very difficult to sustain this kind of a growth trajectory for a very long period of time.
With lesser jobs in the unorganized sector, experts feel that rural demand may remain sluggish in the immediate future. Until then, demand for luxury from India's affluent remains a positive signal for economic revival. Radhika Bajaj, CGTN, Mumbai.
The former head of the Louvre Museum in Paris has been charged with complicity in fraud and money laundering in relation to stolen artifacts. Investigators say Jean-Luc Martinez organised the trafficking of stolen Egyptian antiquities. One was bought by the Louvre Museum in Abu Dhabi, prompting suspicion from Egyptologists. Martinez currently represents France in a role that involves him helping to combat art trafficking. He denies the charges.
Offices around the world have often been empty, dark places during the pandemic. But in London, that could be changing. One company is brightening up the walls with works of art for rent, a bit like Netflix or Spotify for paintings and sculptures. Patrick McRae is CEO of Arctic.
There are studies done on the benefits to people's productivity and well-being within the workplace. But also I think at the moment, there kind of tends to be two key reasons why businesses are leasing art collections from us. The first is the desire to be competitively advantageous against other customers and people in similar sectors. And the second reason is around doing good. There's a great trend on ESG at the moment in business, and having art in the workplace is one way of visually showing one's commitment to a certain cause.
Many companies at the moment cutting costs, though, and I would imagine that businesses like yours, perhaps one of the first things to consider when cutting costs. How are you navigating that?
What we do with our customers is we show them the benefits of engaging with arts and culture. I think a huge part of it is on competitive advantage, as I just mentioned. We work across two main sectors, one in offices and workplaces, the other in hospitality. For our offices, it's all about appealing to their team, how to attract the very, very best talent. And in an economic downturn, you can't afford not to have the best talent working for you. For hotels, it's all about attracting different guest profiles and telling a story, and how the art collection can feed into their marketing.
When it comes to offices, though, obviously many more people are working from home after the pandemic. Are staff going to benefit from seeing these collections, or are they going to be stuck at home not being able to see them?
I think we've all been through the ringer over the last 2 years with coronavirus, and whilst working from home, I think is here to stay. The office isn't going anywhere. I think especially in the last few months, we've realised the importance of the humanity of work and coming together. Many of our clients, and actually many clients in the city, are looking on the office as a cultural hub, and rather than competing with, say, the law firm down the road, they're now competing with their teams' very comfortable working from home setups. And so rather than see a dip in offices wanting to rent art and have art collections in their space, what we're seeing is actually a huge drive forward to make the offices as wonderful as they possibly can be.
I wonder, though, does renting out art come with any particular problems? Do clients sometimes struggle to give it back?
Well, for us, if the client really wants to keep it, they can obviously buy it, which is, I think, a really wonderful part of the offer. And many clients do. They build collections over a long period of time that they love. But I think the rental model and the ability to change, just like we do with Netflix or Spotify or our clothes or fashion, allows clients and people to change collections as times and opinions change.
Now, you might think that one vampire is one too many, so spare a thought for the people of Whitby in Yorkshire, who've witnessed a record-breaking gathering of 1,369 vampires.
It was organised to commemorate 125 years since Bram Stoker wrote Dracula. And fittingly, it happened at Whitby Abbey in northern England, the place that inspired Stoker's book. But don't worry, they're not real vampires. The clue is that the whole event happened in daylight. That's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching.
More on all of our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
We're on smart TV apps, Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV. YouTube, Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Freeview.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again on Monday, same time, same place. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Goodbye.